if my volume is unacceptable for either high or low reasons, just FYI, there's a speaker in the back of the volume switch. I normally have people to regulate that, but if it needs to go up or down, feel free to change it. I won't take it personally. Also, I don't know why the record button and the off button are next to each other on the camera. That just seems totally unnecessary. Because every time I'm about to hit that record button, I always have my thumb on the off button for some reason. Like that's going to help, and then it takes an extra few seconds to kind of spin everything around. So there's this comedian I'm fond of, and on his Facebook page around holiday times, he always puts up like just kind of a little jokey comment. And the one this week was back in 1776, something really important happened, and now I have to go to a barbecue at my parents' house on a Thursday. This might be the weirdest holiday ever. And it is, in a certain regard, to those of us that are 9-to-5ers, the idea that you work and you work and you work, and you got this little weird break during the week, but then you have to go back to work tomorrow. That is, unless, of course, you were way smarter than I was and took off Friday, but I didn't think that far ahead. So I get to roll back into work Friday morning after this weird Thursday holiday and, the whole thing. But it brings up an interesting idea about the notion behind Independence Day and how we often view the more historic and patriotic holidays as almost historical footnotes. We have, and this will be terrifying to everybody in the audience, including myself, we have a new generation of people who view or who are going to view events like September 11th as a historical footnote. They're too young to remember where they were that day, or if they were that day. There are children that are growing up now who are in upwards of 10, 11, 12 years old. It's a terrifying thought, I know. And it's one of those things where I know for me, when I was younger, the historical footnote was things like the Vietnam War, Pearl Harbor. It was this event that obviously affected our nation in a great way, and I don't discount that. But as part of a generation that did not grow up in that moment, it represented no historical relevance to me. I didn't have an emotion that was attached to it. September 11th was really the first one that I had. I was 18 years old, I was in college, and so it was this first national historic event that really impacted me. But now we've even not moved on, but we have reached a point in our society to where it does not resonate as much as we would think it would. Because in the moment, we always think, oh, this is it. We're always going to remember this forever and ever. And now here we are a couple of hundred years later, separated from the year 1776, and Independence Day is a barbecue. It's a barbecue, it's fireworks, it's patriotic music. It's a pretty cool holiday, to be totally honest. It's a great holiday to be outside. It's a great holiday to enjoy hamburgers and hot dogs, and I'm going to take a couple of months off from eating hamburgers and hot dogs because it seems like that's all I ate for the last 4 days. There was this guy at our work who had leftovers, and he came in Friday as kind of a sympathy thing for everybody who had to work that day. And he's like, I'm going to grill some burgers. I'm like, great, thanks, man. I'm totally not full on burgers, but thanks. So kind of overdid it on the cheeseburger ratio this weekend. But it's important to at least acknowledge and celebrate these instances in our lives. It's important to recognize, even if it is just as a historical footnote, because it's important to recognize the time and the effort and the blood that was spilled on these instances, on these national holidays. Because if we let it go, then ultimately we're kind of giving up and we're forgetting what it was all about, what the sacrifices that were made in order to secure our independence, in order to keep our nation safe, in order to keep the world order safe, and to keep the balances from tipping in the wrong direction. It's something that we've always strived for, especially as a democracy. As a democracy, we have prided ourselves in being free and making our own decision. And in the modern world, that's something that as Americans we don't often think about, but it's a privilege that we have that a lot of people in the world don't. And I'm very, very proud of the sacrifices that were made to secure that all the way from 1776 up until now. But when we look at the idea of the world order, when we look at the idea of, there's always been a structure. It could be democracy, it could be a theocracy, it could be, like kings and queens, it could be tyrants, but there's always some semblance of a world order. It is something as people that we are always going to seek and we are always going to find, because we as people strive. We fight tooth and nail to maintain some kind of order. We like to know that the trains are running on time. We like to know that things are not going to change radically from day to day. The passages we're going to be looking at 3 today. I know that's unusual for me. I'm usually laser focused, but I really wanted to hit 3 different. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to give them to you up front so you can mark them. That way we're not just juggling and flipping back and forth. All right, the first one is going to be in Proverbs chapter 12, starting in verse 10. So I'll let you guys go ahead and mark that. You guys are going to be really confused when you mark these passages at first, but I do promise you that they do connect. Okay, so first one is Proverbs 12, starting in verse 10. The second one is in Judges 3, verse 15. And the third one is in Mark chapter 16. And I'll go ahead and loop back to those in a minute. But what I wanted to talk about today is the idea, I kind of wanted this to be a third part in my lessons on being action-oriented Christians. I wanted to talk about the idea and kind of make this a trilogy of sorts, kind of wrap it up today, because I kept coming back around to that theme, and I kept sitting there yesterday going over my notes going, no, I can't just talk about the same thing again. I can't talk about being an action-oriented Christian for a third time in a row. I went, oh wait, what if I make it a series? Then it totally makes sense. And so I'm kind of viewing this as the unofficial part 3 to my unofficial lesson on the unofficial trilogy of being an action-oriented Christian. Because I do believe that when sermons are put together, that when you look inside the Word of God, when you look for inspiration, inspiration often finds you and grabs you and forces you in a certain direction. I know that even when we just study the Bible, passages just seem to leap off the page and inspire us and speak to us personally. And so I chose not to ignore that. It would have been really easy to go, no, I can't do that. I should do this other thing. But I felt like there was probably a reason for that. All right, and so these 3 passages are related to the idea of God's will and the work that we put into it. That's what I talked about last time. The idea about how our faith has to be reached through effort. We can't just simply reach out and grab our faith. We have to pursue it. We have to lock onto it. We have to put the effort into it. And so we're going to look at furthering action today. The first one, the passage from Proverbs, is simply a quote that I think is relevant. Proverbs chapter 12, verses 10 and 11. The righteous care for the needs of their animals, but the kindest acts of the wicked are cruel. Those who work their land will have abundant food, but those who chase fantasies have no sense. This verse really hammers home the first part of my lesson today. The idea that before you take action, before you do anything, you're lining up, you say, I want to be a better Christian, I want to do more, I want to be more for God. The old adage, the old expression, I want to be his hands, I want to be his feet. Before you get to any of that, you have to make sure your intentions are pure. That's the first thing, right out of the gate. Because if you have an ulterior motive, if you have a bitterness or spite, because if there's one thing that we love as people, we love doing things out of spite. We're super good at it. We're super good at acting a certain way and being a certain way and doing certain things just to inconvenience other people, because there's a part of us that thinks they deserve it, and we think we deserve to be in the right. So it's important that when you become more action-oriented, you do it out of a pure sense of heart and mind. You line up with God, you say, God, this is what I want to do. This is who I want to be. These are my intentions, and these are the actions I'm going to take. And if God wills it, it will be done. That's the first step. And so you have to work hard. Those who work their land will have abundant food, but those who chase fantasies have no sense. Specifically talking about the idea of working hard and working diligently within realistic goals and realistic parameters, and allowing God to work through you. Because if you don't do that, you're just chasing fantasies. You're just lining up goals that don't make sense, they're convoluted or they're unattainable, and when you don't reach it, you just go, well, I tried. It's good enough, right? A for effort. It's the attitude that we like to have as people, is A for effort. And oftentimes that does count. Oftentimes we do recognize that it's the thought that counts. But in terms of our relationship with God, it's not just a matter of A for effort. It's that we have to line up with God's plans and we have to succeed. We have to succeed in becoming more righteous. All right, the passage out of Judges chapter 3, we're just hitting one verse here. Because it would have been really easy to take one of the Judges and just hit a whole section and do a whole lesson about that. But what I want to talk about is the idea that we as Christians have different roles as people. We are not all ministers. We are not all missionaries. We are not all singers. We are not all prayers. We are not all writers. You can hit any category of service. You can hit any idea of service. And not everybody is good at everything all the time. I got the one thing I'm good at, and that's Hashan's sermon. That's the one thing I'm good at. Please, for the love of all that is good left in the world, do not ask me to lead singing. For my sake and for yours. It happened once at a very small church in Ohio, and my parents were lucky enough to be there. So you should ask them about it. So that's not the thing that I'm good at in terms of expressing my faith, in terms of expressing my devotion towards God. I'm good at spinning the yarn and throwing a sermon together and yada yada. And so, what I want to touch on very briefly in the book of Judges is that there are different categories of service. There are different, and I'm not even going to say levels, because I don't want to say that my thing is more important than your thing, or your thing is more important than their thing. I don't want to say that. But there are different areas of expertise. There are different things that we can do. From the simplest of actions to the greatest of actions, there are things that we can do as Christians. All right, so Judges chapter 3, verse 15, just really quick. Again, the Israelites cried out to the Lord, and he gave them a deliverer, Ehud, a left-handed man, the son of Jerah the Benjamite. The Israelites sent him with tribute to Eglon, king of Moab. All right, the whole thing with the book of Judges is this constant, unfortunate cycle of God, please help us, and God sends somebody to help them. They say, yay, God. And then the next generation, they go, oh, well, that God thing, that's kind of over, right? We don't really have to believe in that anymore. And so something unfortunate befalls the people of God, and then the next generation, they go, God, save us. And God goes, okay, and sends a judge in. And the book of Judges is so fascinating to me, because it's this idea that God calls on particular individuals. And of course, I picked the left-handed guy because I'm a lefty, that's my favorite judge, is Ehud. But it's the idea that God can specifically call on people to take action. God can go to a person who is a farmer or a shepherd or whatever and say, hey, I want you to take action for me. I want you to go out there and demonstrate your undeniable faith in me by going into this completely absurd situation. And that's what the book of Judges is often about. Is sending a person into insurmountable odds. To send them into something that if you asked any military tactician from Sun Tzu to General Patton or whoever, they would look at that battle plan and they would go, whoa, 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 that's a bad idea. Tactically, this plan isn't sound. Tactically, this plan doesn't make any sense. Whatever you do, don't follow that plan. But God is in the background and God says, it's okay. It's okay. If you believe in me, I will take care of you. And so the judges go forth and they do it. And they do the task that is called upon them for God. And they succeed, which is the really crazy part. The idea that you could ask any military general from the beginning of time to now, and they would tell you that this plan will fail. And in normal circumstances, they would have been right. But these are abnormal circumstances. These are divine circumstances. These are circumstances that exist outside our idea of normal. And it's important to remember that when God calls us for something, Because back then it was shepherds and farmers, and now today, it could still be shepherds or farmers, but it could be accountants. It could be bankers, or somebody who works at 7-Eleven, or somebody who works at Sports Authority, or whatever. There is nothing that makes us any more special or any less special that God can't go to us individually and say, I want you to do this. I knew what I wanted to do going into college. I knew exactly what I wanted to do, and so I lined it up, and I'm making it work, and it's great. Because I trust in God, and I trust that I am on the right path. And so I encourage you to look at that, just look at your personal communication with God in the same fashion. And so finally, we're going to look at Mark chapter 16, verses 14 and 15. This passage follows the crucifixion and resurrection of Jesus. Later, Jesus appeared to the 11 as they were eating. He rebuked them for their lack of faith and their stubborn refusal to believe those who had seen him after he had risen. He said to them, "Go into all the world and preach the gospel to all creation." If you look at our religion's history, you've got prophets, you've got judges, you've got apostles, you've got disciples. You've got all manner of persons who have different talents, who are able to go out there. And leading up to the crucifixion and the resurrection of Jesus, and he comes back and he tells them, and I love the language here. He appears to the 11 as they were eating. He rebuked them for their lack of faith and their stubborn refusal to believe those who had seen him after he had risen. We're talking about a man, a God, who spent 3 years with these people, who spent 3 years encouraging them, showing them miracles, and letting them in, like, kind of to the inside circle, and sharing meals with them, and just having intimate conversations with them, like that really personable, just kind of one-on-one interaction. And he told them for years, that he was going to die, and he was going to come back. And so after he was gone, and after the period of mourning, people came to them and said, "I saw Jesus. It's the craziest thing. He was right. He came back." And they said, no, that's not true. That can't be true. That's impossible. And that's the limitation, that's the block, the mental block that we as Christians place on ourselves. I've got terrifying and stunning news for you. If you believe that Jesus can raise himself from the dead, if you believe that he can conquer death, then you also believe that a man survived inside a giant fish for 3 days. You believe that a man parted the seas. You believe all of these miraculous things because there is nothing so insane in our limited imagination than a person coming back from the dead, regardless of the fact that even if they were God. Because we have rules here, by golly. We have rules that we have established as a society, and as soon as God stops following those rules, well, things just get all crazy, don't they? We have to start believing in a great many of things. We have to believe that Jesus can let a man walk on water by faith. We have to believe that he could heal the sick and fix the crippled and raise people from the dead. That was the thing that's most mind-blowing to me, is when you look at the life of Jesus. He talks and he talks and he talks about how he is the Son of God, and he is the way, the truth, and the light, and how he has power over death. And then he raises somebody from the dead. And his followers still don't believe him that he's come back. Through all of these demonstrations. And so we look at our lives as Christians. We look at finding our place as the righteous. If you look back in that verse in Proverbs, the first line is, "The righteous care for the needs of the animals, but the kindness acts of the wicked are cruel." And we look at the idea that it is something that we strive to be every single day of our lives. It's something I struggle to be every single day of my life. Because righteous is a state that it is so hard for us to get to, and it is so hard for us to keep. Because we put up those blocks. We put up those little mental blocks. We put up these barriers in our minds that when we fail, we say, that's it. The door's locked. Game over, man. That's it. I'm never going to get back up there. Like, I was doing good for a while. I was going to church every Sunday, and I was being kind to my neighbors, and I was doing all the right things. And then I messed up one day, and so that's it. Door's locked. Never going to get back in there. But the idea of being righteous is a constant battle. It's a constant uphill battle that we face every day. But it is something that is worth pursuing. We ask ourselves, what are things worth pursuing? And even if we view it as a historical footnote, even if it was something that lives in the back of our mind at fireworks and barbecues and way too many hamburgers, if you look at things like our Independence Day, we look at that and we say, hey, that's worth fighting for. To live in a free nation every day. To live in a nation where we can say and do whatever we want, to where I can go on the internet and argue with strangers, across the country and not be in fear of what I'm saying. Like, declaring my faith and not living in fear of that. That is something that is worth fighting for. It was worth it to maintain that during the Civil War. It was worth it to fight for it in World War I and World War II, to make sure the balances of power did not tip in the wrong direction, and we lost that freedom. And more importantly, we can just go to England now. I can't believe nobody ever thinks about this, and nobody's mind is ever blown by this concept. We're totally cool with England now. We fought them 200 years ago. We fought them for our independence, and we can just go over there now and get some really amazing fish and chips, or whatever we go over there for. And it's amazing, and that is something worth fighting for. It's worth fighting for, and it's worth healing for. It's worth building a nation that works on international politics and goes out there and tries to fix the conflicts that were made. And so, if that, and I kind of bring that ramble back around to this point. If that is worth fighting for, if that is worth dying for, then why isn't our faith? Why is it so far beyond our imagination to fight for something that will never break down and will never fail us? And when we die and when we face God and when we get to heaven, all that conflict, all that strife, all that worry, that feeling in the pit of your stomach that you have midweek when something's due, or you've got to work on something, or you've got to be somewhere, and you're always moving, that goes away. And so I contend to the point that that is worth fighting for. I contend to the point that that is something worth pursuing, that it is something worth struggling for every day. Like I said, struggling to be righteous, struggling to be more godly is an uphill, everyday battle. I'm not going to lie to you about that. I'm not going to say that once you tag that righteousness, once you get there, it's all over forever and things will be sunshine and rainbows and puppies. I actually read this thing on the internet. It was a fake news post. And it said, thousands of people cuddled to comfort by puppy stampede. And at the bottom of the caption, it said, if only this was actually in the news just once. And so, because we never read things like that. It's always something horrible and something. And so we struggle with it every day. And so I encourage you to find your action, to find your purpose, to find the thing that you can do to encourage others. Whether it affects one person or whether it affects millions of people, you have a divine and grand purpose out there. And just going back very briefly to the first action-oriented thing, I talked about the idea about how we as Christians, even if we don't lead extraordinary lives, have the chance to have extraordinary purpose. If we're just family people with, like the wife or the husband and kids and whatever it may be, we still have the opportunity to do great things. There are people that I know that lead the most ordinary of lives, and they have inspired me to be great. They have done their job as far as God's divine purpose. They have accomplished that, and they continue to accomplish it to this day. And so, I ask you, as we're here today, if you want to join that divine purpose, if you want to pursue it, if you want to fight towards righteousness, and you want to make a step today, and you want to come forth, and you want to be baptized, or you want to look for encouragement from the congregation to recenter yourself, I ask you to contemplate that as we stand and sing.
Amazing grace, how sweet the sound that saved a wretch like me. I once was lost, but now am found. Was blind, but now I see. Was grace that taught my heart to fear, and grace my fears relieve. How precious word that grace appear, the hour I first believed. Through many dangers, toils, and snares, I have already come. 'Tis grace hath brought me safe thus far, and grace will lead me home. When we've been there 10,000 years, bright shining as the sun, we've no less days to sing God's praise than when we first begun. Please be seated.
Good morning.
Morning.
Tim, thank you.